Today's reading is from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda. Why tell God anything when He knows everything? Why offer God anything when He has everything? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Jesus Christ teaches us the ideal prayer, one that addresses very human demands to God. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Jesus himself says, just before suggesting this prayer, Your Father knoweth what things ye have need of, before ye ask him. Why then, his recommendation that we pray for anything? The answer is that we should offer ourselves up in acceptance of his abundance. Don't pester God as though pulling constantly on his sleeve to get his attention. Approach him with the confidence of a child and its parent. And in that spirit, then, ask him lovingly, but with complete trust, as though demanding your birthright, and without the slightest doubt in your mind that he wants only your best. For you don't have to persuade him the way a beggar or a stranger might. You are his own child. God knows everything already. He knows what is in your heart. It is you who need to clarify your feelings, that you attune yourself to him in turn more clearly. For only by such clarity will you be able to receive perfectly what he gives you. For the same reason we need to offer ourselves to him, not because he needs anything from us, except, as Yogananda said, our love to complete his love for us. Because by self-giving, we expand our awareness from its confinement in the little ego outward to infinity. Those who partake of the nectar remaining after a sacrifice, says the Bhagavad Gita in the 4th chapter, attain to the infinite spirit. That person, however, who makes no sacrifices, never truly succeeds in enjoying even the blessings of this material world. How then could he attain happiness in subtler realms? Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everyone. Lovely to be here, and thank you for coming. So today our topic is on prayer. I think it's the second or maybe even third one. I haven't been here for a couple weeks because I've been traveling. I had a family wedding on the East Coast, and then one of my brothers who lives in England and who had a conference in BC came down last weekend after that wedding. And so I had spent the day with him last week. So I might actually repeat some of the things that have happened in the past couple weeks. Hopefully not. But if so, I guess it means that we all needed to hear them again, at least me. So today's topic is about, I love the title of it. It's always been one of my favorite titles. Why tell God anything when he knows everything? Why give God anything when he's already got everything? For gosh sakes. So, and of course the answer is it's for us. It's for our benefit because God already knows what's in our hearts. But through the act of prayer, the act of lifting ourselves, extending ourselves in communion with God, we are able to, first of all, start to develop that close, loving relationship where we understand the fact that our birthright is everything in the universe. And then also we start to become channels for that infinite divine presence. And so one of the components of this is, of course, the reading says the more as we pray, we lift ourselves up in recognition or in acceptance of God's abundance. And one of the things that we find as we start to develop spiritually is that abundance, that birthright, is so much more than we thought it was. There's a sweet little story that we often tell. I'm going to tell some of my favorite stories today, and they're ones I've told many times, so they continue to inspire me. Hopefully they'll inspire you as well. And this one is about the heavenly junkyard. You've probably heard this one before. So this story is about, a spiritual seeker who ends up at the pearly gates in heaven and is being shown around by St. Peter and shown the environs of heaven and everything that's there. And at one point they pass this place that has all this cool looking stuff, and the newbie to heaven says, "Hey, well, what the heck is that?" St. Peter says, "Well, that's the heavenly junkyard. It's filled with things that people didn't want." And so they're walking past it, and this guy sees a Rolls Royce. Not only does he see a Rolls Royce, I decided for our crowd, he sees a Rolls Royce, he sees one of those really cool Tesla cars, the $80,000 ones. He sees that Nissan Leaf, he sees all kinds of things that are really cool. And so he says to St. Peter, "Well, gosh, look at that Tesla car. Who wouldn't have wanted that?" And St. Peter looks at him and says, "Well, funny you should say that, because that was actually destined for you, but you kept praying for a Volkswagen, so that's what we gave you." So this touches on a humorous but deep point, and that is that the birthright, the abundance that God has to give us, is so much more than a few pleasures here on earth. It's so much more than possessions. It's so much more even than mere health, mere harmonious relationships, mere success. What it is a birthright of cosmic consciousness. And so as we begin to develop this feeling of being a child of God, we start to open up more and more to that possibility. And so, how do we go about doing this? Well, one of the things we need to do is establish a connection, and a deep and personal connection. We can think about God in all kinds of philosophical ways, but where does that get us when things go wrong? When we come up against those tests that really pinch us, that really cause the ego to go, ouch, that really take away what we've thought we've known of as us. Well, one of the things that we're always counseled to do is to think of God as our friend, beloved, mother, father. I know that years ago, when I was going through a difficult medical challenge, I was given the counsel of just seeing myself in front of God as a little child and praying that way. And I guess I had thought of that intellectually before, but I really started to use it as a practice. And in that developed such a sense of sweetness, such a sense of safety, and such a sense that, this reading always also talks about accepting perfectly what God has to give us. Well, there are many things coming our way on this journey toward enlightenment. And some of them are more challenging. But in that practice, I felt this sense of the divine as my parent, and of the divine giving me what it was that I needed at that moment, however difficultly packaged it was. One of Yogananda, whose teachings we practice here, Paramahansa Yogananda, one of his most advanced disciples named Sri Gyanamata, Sister Gyanamata, means mother of wisdom. her name. She said, and she suffered greatly through her lifetime physically, and she said at one point that as she got to feel that this was coming from God, that thought, this is coming from thy hand, gave her such a sense of inner peace. And I've always hearkened back to that during difficult times, that sense that, yes, this is all part of a bigger picture. So other aspects of that prayer, that kind of prayer, are having a kind of prayer that's constant, that's an ongoing conversation between us and God. Yogananda used to call it playing walkie-talkie with God. And you can think about it as, I don't know what, texting God all the time, whatever form it is of communication that you routinely use, but keeping a flow going of conversation, not just about the big things, but about the little things. Knowing this reading and this talk was coming up for me, I started to pay more attention to that in the last week and found such a sense of beauty and sweetness in it. Just sharing the little foibles of life, sharing the little happenstances, sharing the little successes and failures that come every day, because we're not tested every day in huge ways, but aren't we tested in little ways? And how sweet it is to share them with that divine friend. In that sharing, in that turning of our minds constantly towards that direction, we get to start to attune ourselves to that higher consciousness that's there. Just the thought of sharing something we feel is crummy with God starts to change it, because that energy can come in. And also we're given that little reminder, oh, well, maybe it's not so crummy. Maybe that other person, is someone good like me. Maybe. We start to draw that to us. There's a book that came out at East West Bookshop a few years ago. I think it was Anne Lamott, a Christian teacher and writer, and it was about prayer. She called it Help, Thanks, Wow. And I always thought that was such a fun title. So I would probably add to that, Help, Thanks, Wow, Hi, Mom and Dad would be my addition to it. But the help, the thanks, that feeling of gratitude, extending a sense of thankfulness out to God. Yogananda, when asked, should we thank God for his gifts, he said, well, yes, but rather thank him for his love, that thing that lies underneath all of the different gifts that we get in this lifetime. Those that are seen, those that are unseen, those that come attractively packaged, those that don't. Another thing that is important is to make it real. The way I think of that is backing it up till it's real. And, we might sit down to pray or to meditate and we think, okay, we're going to say this beautiful prayer. And then there's a part of our minds that's thinking, I don't feel that way. I don't really feel that way. Well, God knows our hearts already. And as this reading says, prayer is our opportunity to clarify within ourselves our own feelings. Not that we want to just stay there down in the dumps, but to just back that prayer up until it's sincere from our heart, but is still going in the right direction. One example that we're often given is if we want to say, God, I love you, and that's not really true in that moment. We can back that up to, God, teach me how to love you. In this moment, I can't feel this. Show me how. And in that, we still retain that loving connection. Or, God, I only want you. I want cosmic consciousness. I want to step into this greater reality. Well, it's not always true for me. Sometimes I want something else. And so then we can pray, God, I want you, but I want this other thing too. I have this desire. Help me to hold this desire in the right way. Help me to turn it so that even that desire becomes a doorway for my growth, for my greater understanding. As we begin to grow in our prayer life, the tenor of our prayers change. One of my favorite prayers from Gyanamata, who I mentioned before, is one she talks about, again, in a difficult situation in her life. She knew that something was coming to her. She had the feeling that it was God's will and that she couldn't stop it, and yet, she was despairing of this thing. And so I find what happened next very interesting, because she said she cast around in her mind and heart for the prayer that God would accept. That's the thy will be done part. Thy kingdom come is wanting that cosmic consciousness. Thy will be done is accepting what we have to go through in order to get there. So she said she cast around in her mind and heart quickly for some kind of prayer that God would accept. And what came to her was, to me, one of the most meaningful prayers I've ever heard. Change no circumstance in my life, change me. She said that when that prayer came into her mind, she felt a sense of relief. She said it was akin to being in a very stuffy room and suddenly having the window open. Because it's not getting our way necessarily that brings us greater happiness. It's attuning ourselves, finding that way to attunement with the divine will, with the greater will. Which kind of brings us to the second part of this reading, which is about, why give God anything? And the reading says that by offering ourselves to Him, or by sacrificing, it talks about sacrificing in the Gita reading, that component is important, that offering up is important. And why is that? If you think about it, here we are, we're sitting here, we've come on our journey, spiritual journey, for how many lifetimes, we don't know, certainly maybe some years in this lifetime, and we're all sitting in a place like this because we want more. We understand at some level that the ego, that part of us that's just identified with this one little body, this one little life, it's been fine, it's brought us this far, but it's not enough. It holds us bound. And so this idea of sacrifice, of offering up, is one understood in the right way, of offering up the little us into a greater reality. There's a beautiful story from the life of Mother Teresa, where in her work in Calcutta, she would help, of course, the poorest of the poor, and part of that was giving food. So one day a food truck came, and there were lines of people, and all the food was given out, and just as the last person was leaving with their little portion of rice and something else, someone else came. There was no food for them. So the last person, who, even though they'd gotten a very tiny, meager portion, probably was going to be taking that little portion of rice home to feed a larger family, needed that rice desperately, said, I'll let you have part of mine. I'll let you have half of mine. Well, Mother Teresa said she knew that another truck was coming very soon, or the next day, soon enough, and she knew who the person was. She said she didn't say to that person, oh no, there's another truck coming, don't worry. She said, and I find this very interesting, she said, I let them give that rice away because I wanted them to know the joy of the sacrifice. And I think we've all experienced this in some way or another. It's that moment, that feeling that we get when we break through temporarily or loosen the ego's hold on us, when we're able to step into understanding someone else as ourselves, getting beyond a selfish desire to see a broader picture and step into that reality. Whatever it is, we feel the soul able to breathe. That's the essence of this sacrifice. That's the nectar. It's the nectar of feeling and tasting our soul nature. I know I've had many times in my life where I have made that other choice, the choice to remain small, and felt that subsequent sense of cramping, that subsequent sense of just confinement. And whereas the times when I've been able to step out, to relax back into my center, to connect with God, to pray about it as it's happening, then I'm able to step forward into the light, into that greater soul reality. And of course, once we step into that larger reality, we're able to become a channel for it. Yogananda said that the highest prayer to God that we can make is, "Give me thyself, that I may give thee to all." And that allows us to live in that beautiful flow of love, of harmony, of power, of energy, of light and joy. Many of us know this book, which is Yogananda's book of prayer, poems, and demands, and I just wanted to recommend it just as a wonderful way to start to develop this understanding of how we can pray all the time in so many ways. This book has little, almost prayer recipes for everything from lagging energy to despondency to frayed nerves to hurt feelings to understanding that you've become kind of critical. I mean, so many different things are in here, to feeling a need for safety, just all the different things we come away with in our human experience or go through in our human experience. And these offer us a way to send out a song of love to God, because we want it to be that, a song of love, a song of communion. There are beautiful things in store for us, even along the journey as we're getting tests, and this also celebrates those. I wanted also just to mention today that today is, I don't know enough about it, not being a native from India, but I was asked to say just a little bit about Diwali today. Diwali, that festival of light, and how does this tie in to our talk today? Well, one of the components of it is the victory of light over darkness. One of the ways it's celebrated is as the victory of Lord Rama over Ravana, the demon, and he of rescuing his wife from Ravana. And of course, Rama represents the soul, and so rescuing our soul nature from the demons of our littleness and of our darkness, the self-created darkness, when we allow ourselves to be just enclosed in the ego. So I thought it might be sweet as we go through the Festival of Light, which will happen later on, just to think about that. One of the things that people often do in India is they start afresh on during this time period. Businesses start their books anew. People buy new clothing, clean their houses, set candles around, and forgive, pay off old debts, forgive old grudges, and just step into the light, step into that light of God. And so let's use this as our opportunity to do that. I wanted to just end with one of these whispers, actually two, since they're both little short ones. Whispers from eternity. The demand that God respond. Today, Father, thou hast come into my temple. With thy coming, all the lights of my sense servants have sprung to life, and the door of my heart has been opened wide. Thy blessing has driven away the darkness of ages, sending its heavy vapors fleeing at the first glimpse of thy approach. The loud beating drums of my craving announce thy manifestation. The incense of devotion rising from the incenser of my soul wafts upward to thee. O bless me always, respond to me whenever I call to thee. O divine friend, though the darkness of my ignorance be as old as the world, still make me realize that with the dawn of thy light, the darkness will vanish as though it had never been. Let's just take a moment in meditation.